You've met him before, not in the flesh, but in that moment after midnight when a message doesn't come. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't offer explanations. And yet, you orbit him like a wounded planet circling a sun that never burns for you. You say he's cold, but you keep returning, because something in his silence feels like home, not comfort, no, never that, but the home you fled from long ago, the one lined with unread letters and shut doors. There's a shadow behind his stillness, a kind of divine cruelty that does not apologize, and that is what you crave. Not the man, but the mirror he refuses to become. You want to see yourself through him, and he never gives you the chance. That is the game. That is the addiction. And somewhere inside, you already know the one who never explains is the one who holds the script. The more he withholds, the more you confess, the less he moves, the more you unravel. And you wonder, was it always this way? Or did you fall in love with the silence long before you heard his voice? She is drawn to what does not flinch because you, too, are terrified of the gaze that sees too much. You have always hated being watched for too long, not because you feared being seen, but because you feared being known. There is a difference, and the man who never explains himself, he knows it. He doesn't stare to understand you. He stares until you explain yourself to him, as if confession were a compulsion. You begin to feel that his silence is not passivity, but control, his lack of response, a theater in which your emotions perform without script. He does not resist, he does not react. He becomes the still surface upon which every wave of your desire, insecurity, and longing is reflected back to you, not distorted, not colored, just observed. And that is the unbearable part. He never flinches because you do. You were never addicted to attention. You were addicted to attention withheld, not love given freely, but love earned. Earned through guessing, waiting, doubting. There is a rhythm to it, the pause before the message, the hours of silence that teach your body to tremble in anticipation, the brief reply that feels like a spotlight after days in the dark. He never raises his voice, yet you are always listening, always preparing the next explanation, always rewording your softness so that it does not sound like need, because need is weakness, and he has taught you this without saying a word. You try to call him out. You say he's emotionally unavailable, distant, maybe narcissistic, but somewhere deeper beyond the echo chamber of your pride, you already know this isn't dysfunction. It's design, and he is not hiding. He is revealing something about you that you are not ready to see. His silence is not a wall, it is a mirror. And what it reflects is the fear that you are not enough unless someone is trying to figure you out. So when he doesn't ask, when he doesn't explain, when he simply is, you unravel. You tell yourself he is mysterious, but he is not. He is simple. It is you who are complex, layered, insecure, endlessly interpreting. He, meanwhile, sits in the unbroken circle of his own mind, not because he lacks emotion, but because he does not explain it. And that defiance, that refusal to become emotionally legible, is what makes you follow him into the labyrinth of your own self-doubt. He doesn't move, but you spin, you perform, reveal, suggest, and the more he withholds, the more you give. There's something sacred about his restraint. He withholds not only his words, but his reasons. You don't know why he touches you one night and vanishes the next, why he listens with such depth, but leaves you to wander in his silence afterward. He doesn't comfort you, he doesn't explain himself, and that makes you explain yourself, over and over again. You rewrite texts, you edit your tone, You wonder if you were too much or too little, and that wondering becomes worship, because what you can't understand, you try to deserve. You never begged for love, but you begged for clarity, and that is how he kept you, not through passion, but through ambiguity. He is the question without an answer, and you keep answering, not because he asked, but because the silence between his eyes and his mouth feels like a void demanding to be filled. You call it emotional depth, but it is not depth. It is absence, and it is your own hunger that creates the illusion of mystery. You fill in his blanks with the narrative you want to believe that he is hurt, or holy, or haunted, but he is none of these. He simply does not flinch. You think stillness is kindness, but this stillness, his stillness, is violence. The gentle kind. The kind that doesn't bruise the skin, but rearranges your sense of self. You come away from each conversation feeling like you've lost something, but you can't name it, and so you return to him again and again, not for love, but for coherence. He has become the editor of your identity, the one whose silence grants or denies meaning to your words. When he doesn't respond, you revise. When he smiles, you amplify. When he turns away, you shatter, not because you were rejected, but because you were not seen. But he did see you, just not the way you wanted. He saw how your voice trembled in the spaces between your arguments, how your laughter always arrived half a second too late. He saw how you changed the way you breathed when he leaned in. He saw how deeply you needed him to need you and how much power he had simply by not reacting. And he used it. Not cruelly, not even consciously, but with the cold precision of someone who does not explain because explanation is surrender. You want him to be vulnerable, to explain his past, to justify his moods, but he remains an outline, a suggestion of something just out of reach. And you mistake that suggestion for depth. You build whole cathedrals in your mind out of his shrugs, his half-glances, his monosyllabic answers. You write novels from the way he touches your back for 3 seconds longer than necessary. But these stories are yours, not his. He has written nothing. He remains the blank page, and that blankness becomes your obsession, because you, too, are a mask. You, too, refuse to blink. You have spent your life becoming what others needed, explaining yourself to be loved. And now, finally, you meet someone who does not demand that of you, but it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like a dare to exist without being decoded, a dare to sit in silence without becoming irrelevant. And you can't do it. You begin to crave the performance again. You want to be misunderstood because it gives you something to correct. You want him to challenge you because then, at least, you are real. But he never plays. He watches. He does not teach. He does not confess. He lets you dance alone. And somehow, that becomes more intimate than sex. You offer him your shadow, your shame, your unfinished thoughts, and he does not touch them. Not out of apathy, but out of awareness. Because he knows if he speaks, the spell breaks. If he explains, the mirror shatters, and you might stop reflecting yourself through him. So he remains the silence, the mask, the gaze that does not blink. You think you want connection, but what you really want is reflection, and he refuses to give it. That refusal becomes a wound, a sacred wound, a wound you protect. Because to be seen is terrifying, but to be seen wrong is worse. So you prefer the man who never tries, who never interprets you, who never puts his fingerprints on your story. He leaves you untouched, and that untouched place, that abyss he never enters, becomes the most intimate part of you. He is not mysterious. He is not deep. He is not cruel. He is simply free. Free from the need to be understood. Free from the compulsion to please. And you, in your ache to be chosen, have mistaken that freedom for power. You've built your longing around his silence, like ivy wrapping a statue, and the more you grow, the colder he becomes. And yet, you stay, not because you are weak, but because part of you still believes that if you explain yourself perfectly, if you find the right words, the right timing, the right version of yourself, he will finally speak, finally choose, finally blink. But he never does. He never will. He was never the puzzle. You were. The less he says, the louder your soul trembles, for absence is not emptiness. It is the unbearable presence of your need. You begin to realize it in fragments in the quiet, after your voice echoes into his silence, in the way your questions fall like stones into a bottomless well. His absence is not absence. It is design, a carefully constructed emptiness, too clean to be natural, too precise to be accidental. You wait for meaning to surface, but all you find is yourself staring back, your voice, your need, your ache. He is not the one revealing himself. He is the one revealing you. And still, you call it love. But it isn't love. It's the sound your soul makes when no one answers. He does not explain because he does not need to be understood. And that is what terrifies you, because you have spent your life making yourself understandable, digestible, approachable. You have crafted your words, your smiles, your softness to be accepted, interpreted, loved. But he is a wall that does not echo, a cathedral with no priest. You pray into the silence, and the silence becomes divine, not because it answers, but because it refuses to, and that refusal becomes holy in your eyes. You start to believe that what is silent must be sacred, what is unreachable must be worthy. You keep trying to find the reason behind his stillness. You say maybe he was hurt, maybe he's been betrayed, maybe no one ever listened. You build a mythology from his quiet, a theology from his non-response. But the truth is simpler. He does not speak because he chooses not to. He withholds not out of pain, but out of possession. And that possession is not of you, it is of himself. You want him to open up, to hand you the keys, but he has never been locked. You are not trying to rescue him. You are trying to invade, and he lets you try. That is his cruelty. He allows your imagination to do the work. You speak into the dark and wait for shape to form, but nothing does. You project his wounds, his fears, his secrets, and he never confirms, never denies. He becomes the cathedral in which your longing rings like a bell with no reply. And the more he withholds, the more holy he seems. The more you ache, the more sacred the ache becomes. Until one day, the ache is the man. He no longer needs to do anything. His absence becomes your altar. You begin to worship what he doesn't give, the text he doesn't send, the explanation he doesn't offer, the intimacy he withholds. You interpret every pause as a message, every delay as a challenge, every silence as a strategy. But there is no strategy. There is only the void he leaves for you to fill, and you fill it with apologies, with dreams, with tears he never sees. You build temples out of unanswered questions. You write psalms from his indifference. And slowly, you stop seeking the man. You start seeking the silence he provides. Because the silence gives you purpose. As long as he does not explain himself, you are still in the game, still trying, still necessary. If he were to speak plainly, if he were to say, "I do not love you," or "I do not need this," the cathedral would crumble, but he never does. He says nothing, and that nothing becomes everything. The silence gives you hope. The absence keeps you alive, because what is not said cannot reject you. What is not defined cannot disappear. So you linger, you serve, you bleed, and all the while you say you want honesty, but the truth is you fear it, because honesty would break the spell. Honesty would close the door. But his silence, oh, his silence, it leaves everything open, every possibility, every illusion, every hope. You dance in the echo chamber of your own projections, and he watches, not out of manipulation, but out of apathy. And that apathy feels like power, because you are powerless, and you mistake your trembling for love. You tell your friends he's mysterious, that he's guarded, but he is not. He is empty, and it is your own need that gives him shape. Like a cathedral built from sound, he exists only in the echoes of your voice. And when you stop speaking, when you finally grow silent, you see it. You see that there is nothing behind the altar, no God, no mystery, only stone. And still, you pray, because you have learned to love the echo more than the reply, the anticipation more than the arrival. You need his silence like a starving man needs hunger, not because it feeds you, but because it gives your ache meaning. You are addicted to waiting, to wondering, to weaving narratives in the dark. He doesn't need to explain himself because you do it for him. Every day, every night, in every reread message, in every overanalyzed pause. You are the architect of your own cage, and he is the nothing inside it. You begin to forget what his voice sounds like, not because it is rare, but because it never says what you need. And the more you forget, the more sacred it becomes. His voice becomes the relic, his silence, the doctrine, and you, the believer, keep chanting, hoping that if you just suffer enough, love enough, wait long enough, he will finally speak. But if he speaks, he disappears. Because the entire cathedral was built on absence, not presence, and you know this. You know that if he were to turn, to face you fully, to explain, the illusion would collapse. The sacred ache would become ordinary. The God would fall. And so you keep him distant. You protect his silence as much as he does, because his mystery is the only thing keeping your desire alive. You do not want the man. You want the feeling of wanting him. And so, the game continues. He offers you nothing, and you offer him worship. He stands in stillness, and you kneel in motion. You ask, and he remains silent. And in that silence, you hear your own soul fractured, unfinished, begging to be known. But he does not know you. He does not want to. And that, somehow, is why you stay, because you were never seeking love. You were seeking a cathedral for your pain, and in his silence, you found it. But now you are inside it, alone, and it is cold. And you begin to ask, what would happen if I stopped speaking? What would happen if I left the silence unanswered? Would the cathedral fall, or would it finally echo with the only voice that matters, yours? He does not explain because he has no need to be known, and you keep staring, hoping your chaos will find form in his refusal. There is something unbearable about someone who does not mirror you. You gesture and wait for the ripple. You speak and brace for resonance, but nothing comes. He listens, perhaps, nods, maybe, but it is not real. Listening, it is a kind of still absorption that leaves no imprint. You walk away unchanged, not because you gave nothing, but because you received nothing in return. And still, you go back, not to find him, but to try again. You keep hoping that if you say it right, softer, clearer, More vulnerably, the mirror will flicker, the surface will crack, that he will finally reflect you back to yourself in some recognizable shape. But the mirror never moves. And that is the deepest cruelty. You are not ignored. You are witnessed without recognition. You want to be seen, but not dissected, understood, but not simplified, loved, but not controlled. And he seems to offer that. He does not interrupt. He does not shape your words into meaning. He simply holds space, and that feels rare, noble, even. But what you don't notice, not at first, is that this space is sterile. It is not reverent silence. It is absence of engagement. He is not protecting your mystery. He is protecting his own detachment. You are left dancing alone in the presence of someone who never truly joins the music. And that loneliness is more profound than any solitude you have ever known. You convince yourself he is deep, that he must be processing, analyzing, silently understanding. But what if he's not? What if there is no inner monologue behind those eyes? No psychological novel being written as you unravel in front of him? What if he is simply watching detached, not out of wisdom, but out of distance? You project oceans where there are only puddles. You imagine a storm where there is only fog, because the human mind cannot bear a vacuum. You would rather fill him with your fantasy than accept the emptiness of his gaze. And perhaps he is not even trying to deceive you. Perhaps he never claimed depth, never promised intimacy, never said he understood. You only assumed. You filled in the blanks, and now those blanks have become your obsession. You chase closure that was never withheld, only never offered. You are addicted not to him, but to the fantasy of who he might be. If only he would speak, but he never does, because he has no need to. He is not seeking recognition. He is not trying to be loved. He is not, in truth, even playing the game. You are. You ask him questions and he smiles vaguely. You share secrets and he thanks you for your honesty, but his eyes never change. They do not soften, widen, tighten. They remain as they were, unmoved, untouched. And you feel like a performer on a stage without audience. You bleed beautifully. You confess everything. But there is no applause, no reaction. Just the quiet whir of the ceiling fan, the echo of your own voice in the hollow of the room, and his still face absorbing, recording, but never returning. You begin to doubt your instincts, to question your own meaning. Maybe you're too much. Maybe your emotions are wrong. Maybe you are hard to love, because he does not offer friction. He does not fight, resist, or cry. He does not need repair. So the only explanation your mind allows is this: it must be me. You carry the blame because it gives you agency. If it's your fault, you can fix it. If it's his void, you are helpless. So you rewrite your personality in his name. You dull your edges. You smooth your passion. You swallow your questions. And still the mirror gives you nothing. Because it was never a mirror, it was glass. He sees through you, but you cannot see into him. And this is where the truth lives, quietly. Like a blade under silk, he is not afraid of being known. He simply does not care to be. He does not fear vulnerability. He sees no use for it. Where you are tangled in the myth of connection, he lives in the clarity of solitude. He is not broken. He is untouched. And his untouchedness, that sterile, sealed stillness, becomes the void that pulls you in. You think you can open him, but he was never closed. He was never yours to reach. And you are not addicted to him. You are addicted to the unfinished sentence, the open loop, the glance that hints at meaning but never commits. You mistake his distance for potential. You believe the silence is depth waiting to be excavated. But the truth is simpler. He is not a mystery. He is not a challenge. He is a man who does not require reflection. He does not need to be mirrored, or adored, or explained. And that is what seduces you most, because your entire life has been performance. Now you are faced with someone who does not clap, and you break. Not because he hurt you, but because he refused to become the screen for your projection. He refused to mirror the self you wanted to be. He remained himself whole, silent, unmoved while you collapsed in longing. He does not reject you. He does not embrace you. He does not label you. He does not name your pain. He does not make you real, and without that reflection, you begin to fade. Your image dissolves. Your drama unravels. You are left with what you cannot bear yourself. But something deeper stirs there beneath the wound, beneath the ache. A quiet voice, one you haven't heard in years. Whispers, maybe this is the truth. Maybe no one can reflect you. Maybe you were never meant to be seen through another. You do not want to hear it. You turn the volume down. You look again into his eyes, hoping for contradiction. But it's still the same, the mirror that does not reflect. And for the first time, you understand. You were never addicted to him. You were addicted to trying to mean something, trying to be worthy, trying to break the silence, trying to make the reflection happen. You were addicted to your own noise, and now, in his silence, you are learning something terrifying, something sacred, that your chaos has no shape unless you give it one, that your meaning cannot be bestowed, only chosen, that your reflection is not out there, it never was. It is not in his gaze, it is in the void he leaves behind. And maybe, just maybe, that void was never punishment. It was invitation. You close your eyes. He is no longer there, or maybe he never was. The silence remains, but now, it does not reach for you. It just exists, like fog in a forest, like breath in winter. And somewhere inside you, the ache softens, not because it is healed, but because it is no longer hungry. You speak nothing. You ask nothing. The cathedral is empty now. No footsteps, no prayers. Just the sound of your own heart, pulsing like a slow drum in a vast hall that once echoed his silence. You do not wait anymore. You do not perform. The mirror is gone. And in its absence, you find the strangest thing, a voice that does not need to be heard, a gaze that does not need to be met, a self that does not need to be explained, only walked with, through the dark, without reflection.